welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And joining us now to review some headlines in today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Good morning, Mr. Efeni.
Good morning, Leila.
Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Ruben.
Welcome.
Yes, just before the newspapers, your conversation about the NYSC.
Yes, and about the dress code.
And the dress code. Well, it's not unusual for Christians to say they don't want to wear trousers, female, because it has biblical principles. Man should not wear the apparel of a woman and vice versa. That's where the principle comes from. But if the NYSC can bend backwards and allow hijab, which is not part of the NYSC dress code, then perhaps there should also be a way to bend backwards to accommodate some of these girls who resist. It's not compulsory. All NYSC participants must climb those ropes. I did not climb
Mr. Efeni, it's an activity-based thing.
I did not climb those ropes during my service here.
Oh, you were one of the lazy ones.
However, I was
who went to Mame Market while the rest of us were following the rules.
I was playing football. However, you must also note that a number of faith-based universities, Babcock, Covenant, they don't allow their female students to wear trousers. So if these girls are Christians coming from Christian homes, they've passed through faith-based...
with all due respect to Christianity,
no, wait,
really Christianity?
Passed through faith-based universities where they were not allowed to wear trousers, and they intend to keep that tradition going to the NYSC. There should be some
I think that's the time for them to break free from a tradition that's maybe just hindering them.
Breaking free is up to the individual. And it depends on what you mean by breaking free.
Breaking free in terms of actually understanding
why tradition is important.
There's times in life where you have to,
We can also make a case for change.
Exactly.
Right? And, there must be appropriate channels for engaging the NYSC to say that perhaps maybe the time has come, after so many years, to review the dress code. Mm-hmm. Nigeria is an increasingly religious country, and that should not be surprising. Mm-hmm. With the frustration in the land, with the poverty, with the level of depression, everybody is running back into the religious cocoon and claiming faith to determine everything, even things that are harmless. So there could be a conversation around that.
Yes.
And I know where you are coming from. You are a pastor.
An elder.
You are not a pastor. You are an elder.
I'm not a full-time pastor.
Some of these categorizations are so many.
No, you need to know
that sometimes they can be very confusing. Some people call themselves elder. Some say they are apostle.
No, let's use the proper English word. I'm a lay reader.
You are a lay reader, yes. An elder in a church.
Yes.
So I understand where you are coming from, defending faith-based dress code. But we can have a conversation around it.
True.
But it's not for people who sign up for national service to now unilaterally, on their own, take the law into their hands and say that they will not accept the uniform that has been in place for, is it not more than 40 years now?
Yes, just as some people unilaterally decide to wear hijab.
We cannot encourage lawlessness.
No, it's not lawlessness. We have two major religions in the country. And if you accommodate one, please try and accommodate the other.
Yeah, but in any case, they are not even talking about trousers here.
Yeah, because Christianity also doesn't say trousers is the apparel of men.
Saying we don't want people wearing skirts, and then when they are climbing ropes or they are doing march past and all that, they will be exposing
There's a lot of physical-based activities in NYSC.
Okay, just to shed some more light on that.
Yeah, from a religious, conservative perspective.
If you will. Now let's move on.
But it's a point of view.
Yes.
I take it in good faith.
Yes, let's move on to the review of the newspapers. These day newspapers. Unending insurgency raises need for military to double troops. Well, according to this report, because of the size and the scale of the insurgency which has been on and is not about ending, of course, when you add the continued involvement of the military in other internal security activities, then there is the need to increase the troop number. Recently, the military promoted over 300 military officers.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's also a way of freeing spaces so that more people can move up, and you need to replace many of these, those who have moved up. But the issue of number, yes, we may need more number, but the number we have now, are they adequately
it's a tragic
equipped to do the job we have given them? Because we've heard of our soldiers not adequately equipped, sometimes being outgunned by these insurgents who come in with sometimes superior firepower. So perhaps as we are talking about number, we should not lose sight of the need to equip the military adequately and bring technology to bear in this fight against the insurgency in the northeast and banditry across other parts of the north.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have a point, and if you read the story, it's really very disturbing that we don't have enough soldiers. But let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll take a more detailed look at that story. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us in the studio is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni, who has been reviewing top stories from around the world in some of today's newspapers. Now, Emmanuel Efeni, before we went on break, we were talking about the fact that the Nigerian military needs more troops, more soldiers, and that the average strength of the Nigerian military is just 150,000. And in terms of actual deployment, we don't even have up to that number actively engaged. I think that's scary. What we've been hearing before now is that we do not have enough policemen, that the total strength of the Nigeria police is about 350,000 men. Only recently, the police tried to recruit 10,000 more, which is just still a very small number.
And that recruitment is mired in controversy already?
Correct, between the Inspector General of Police Office and the Police Service Commission. And if you look at the ratio, it's very bad, it's poor. And if you look at the ratio also in terms of the number of soldiers that we have, that also is an issue. But you raised the point about technology. So for the Nigerian military, clearly we need a lot in terms of numbers, in terms of the troops. And second, we also need a lot in terms of capacity. Capacity relating to technology, relating to modernizing the Nigerian army. But the point you can also make is that the strength of our military, either in terms of number or in terms of capacity, will depend on the threat level that we face within the region. What is the assessment of the level of threat that Nigeria deals with, in terms of threat to its sovereignty? You may say that we're in peacetime, but the logic of it is that, when you have a military, you might as well just have a proper military.
Yes.
And you must be prepared at all times because you don't know where the threat will come from. Even if there is no threat for a long period, every nation, as part of its national pride, should have a strong, defense mechanism.
Yeah.
But it's not surprising when you say we don't have enough people, we don't have enough in terms of capacity, that the Nigerian military now finds itself where it is more enthusiastic to do internal security work. But we must do everything possible, to make sure that we don't end up with a military that is another version of the police force, that is more interested in joining customs and immigration and civil defense, to do civilian, to carry out civilian operations. Okay?
We should not allow them to enjoy that kind of job.
We have a military, a president with a military background. But as I said, all of this will depend on an assessment of the level of threat, within a period to the country.
Okay. With the continued insurgency, influx of ISIS and ISWAP, then we can say there's threat level that warrants our increase in the number of our troops. as well as the capacity, just like you just mentioned. Let's move on to other issues. Going now to the border and border closure. The Daily Independent. Continued border closure threatens terror. Go Punch newspaper still, the border closure, fuel supply suspension, petrol scarcity hits border towns. Fuel now 600 naira per litre. Fuel smuggling thrives in Adamawa, Sokoto. Task force brutalizes Idiroko residents. Now, yesterday, we're talking about perhaps the glimmer of benefit from the closure when we talk about the strengthening of the naira. But today, some of the negative consequences, because apart from the closure, the customs went ahead to ban the sale or the supply of petrol to filling stations 20 kilometers to the border. And I wonder, the Nigerians who live 20 kilometers to the border, what are they expected to do? This is the impact. 600 naira per litre, that's what they are paying. The telecommunications companies are complaining how to move petrol to service their base stations in that area. Before long, they say, perhaps the operations in that area may be grounded. And we have closed the border. 20 kilometers to the border, we are banning the sale of petrol. So what is happening?
Well, I think the discordant tunes that we have been hearing about, the effect, the nature, and the scope of the closure of Nigeria's land borders against its neighbors clearly shows that, look, what we're dealing with here is really not a strategy. Because if it's a strategy, government will have thought through it. There will have been an attempt to look at the possible dimensions of the problem. And we will not be faced with this situation whereby today somebody comes and says, oh, it has helped us to check the smuggling of petroleum and rice. And then the next day, the next thing you hear is that, petroleum smuggling is still happening either in the northern part or in the southern part, And then you see videotapes of customs officials reducing themselves to the ridiculous extent of harassing women, carrying small portions of imported rice in cellophane bags. I think that maybe someday somebody will sit down and do a proper scholastic, empirical study of what has happened, so that government in the future will know that, look, when you want to take certain decisions, you look at it both in the short term, medium term, and long term, and you see it through before you make an announcement. And our knee-jerk reactions do not always help, either at the level of economic management or, diplomatic relations with our neighboring countries.
Okay. Another aspect where we still have problems, daily trust. Apapa lockdown defies presidential intervention. After the hue and cry, the president set up a task team to resolve the Apapa gridlock problem. But today, many months after, that intervention seemed to have gone up in smoke, and Apapa seemed to be worse off than before that intervention. I still have my colleagues who work in Apapa.
Yes, I was going to say you are an Apapa man. So you have always been calling for railway,
yes,
and all of that.
Unfortunately, this problem is still there after all the intervention, muddled up by some of the security agents that were even asked to enforce this intervention by government. They became part of the problem.
But does this require really rocket science? First, we have problems with our ports. Either it's the One port or the Onitsha port or it's the Apapa port or the Calabar port, and even the so-called deep sea ports or the inland dry ports, right? Now, we need to modernize the ports in Nigeria. The point has been made that, in fact, the kind of ports that we have cannot even handle cargo. There's a deficit in terms of demand and supply. And we have a problem in terms of capacity and in terms of the quality of the ports. The modern port in the world today has a draft of about 17 to 18 meters, depth. But the ones we have, the deepest port we have is just about 11 meters. So that's another problem that we're trying to deal with. But with regard to Apapa, it's about the clearing of cargo, moving cargo away from the ports. At the time, there was supposed to be a holding bay for many of these trucks, right? Somebody in his wisdom, converted that to something else and then created this traffic jam. And every time we hear task force, what exactly is the task force doing? And this is a task force that is at the presidential level. Yeah. Now, whatever it is that they need to do is plain sight. Yeah. They can see it. So why are they not doing it?
Nothing short
the
of
roads
the obvious.
To the port
and the implications
very bad.
for business and economy. Apapa Port alone handles billions of naira worth of goods in
Most
a day.
of the goods coming into the country come through Apapa and Tinkan ports. Both of them are in the same vicinity. Yes. Yeah. Now let's just move on to, if we have time, we'll take some Nigerian newspapers before we move forward. International, okay? Let's move on to the UK, where the elections still on, but the big development is Nick Farage, the
Nigel Farage, the Brexit party leader.
Nigel Farage, the Brexit party leader, who has now pulled out their candidates from the 317 seats won by the Conservatives in the last election. But the Conservatives are saying that is not even enough, that it should pull out from all Labour strongholds totally. But whether this will help Boris Johnson, many see it as a boost to Boris Johnson's...
Most certainly, yes. And Nigel Farage initially had said, yes, Boris Johnson's proposal in terms of Brexit was not good enough, but there were talks, even at the time, about coalition, about alliances. And clearly any form of coalition or alliance will give, the Conservatives an advantage and probably prevent a situation whereby we have a hung parliament after the elections. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Efeni.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.